I stood at the back of the church, numb and heavy with grief, when I overheard my daughter-in-law whisper, "Finally free." At my son's funeral, I didn't realize the hatred she had buried so deep. But in that moment, I made a choice. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. My name's Barbara and I'm 57 years old. I live in a small town in Northern California, nestled in the shadows of redwood trees, where everyone knows everyone, and not just their business, but their history too. I'm a mother, a grandmother, a neighbor, but today I was just a woman who had lost her son. I was standing in the back of the church, clinging to the edge of a pew as the mourners filed in, faces solemn, whispers barely audible. My knees wobbled beneath me, as if I could still feel the weight of everything that had brought me here. I glanced down at my hands, wrinkled, tired hands, hands that had held my son when he was a child, helped him through his broken heart when his first love turned away, and now, those same hands were trembling as they clutched the fabric of my coat. The service was moving slowly, as if the entire world was taking its sweet time to let me catch my breath. My son Jason had passed away just 2 days ago. He was 32. I could barely believe it. It was a heart attack, totally out of the blue. He'd always been healthy, full of energy. He left behind his wife, Lisa, and their 2 children. The pain of losing him felt like I had been stabbed by something that shouldn't have existed, a wound I didn't deserve, not at my age, not at my stage of life. I tried not to look at Lisa, but I couldn't help it. She was standing by the coffin, her face a picture of grief, but there was something in her posture, something too stiff, too rehearsed. I could see it now, the way she held herself back from really grieving, like she had been doing this dance for years. It was almost unnatural. The priest droned on, his voice barely reaching me as I stood there, lost in my thoughts. My mind kept going back to Jason's last words to me. He had called me the night before he died just to check in. "Mom, you doing all right?" he had asked, his voice warm and comforting. I told him I was fine, but the truth was, I hadn't been. I hadn't been for years. It wasn't just losing Jason that hurt. It was the fact that I had been losing him bit by bit long before that night. Lisa, his wife, was the one who had pushed him away from me. At first, I thought it was just her adjusting to being a new wife, a new mother. But it didn't take long for me to see the cracks in her smile. The way she would always make subtle digs at me, little jabs disguised as compliments. And now, here I was, standing at the edge of my son's funeral, alone. "Barbara!" a voice called from behind me, pulling me out of my thoughts. I turned to see my best friend, Marge, walking toward me with a concerned look on her face. She was always there, always had been. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I forced a smile, wiping my eyes. "I'm fine," I lied. Just taking it all in." Marge nodded, understanding, but I could see the concern still in her eyes. "It's a lot to take in, Barb. You don't have to do this alone." I nodded again, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the service went on, I moved to a side aisle to get some air. I wasn't sure if I needed to be alone or if I just wanted to escape for a few minutes, but I needed to breathe. That's when I heard it, a voice, sharp and full of bitterness, slicing through the murmur of the crowd. "Finally free." I froze. It was Lisa's voice. She wasn't talking to anyone, but I could hear the venom in her words. The words seemed to hang in the air like a weight pressing down on me. Free? Free from what? I turned quickly, trying to see if anyone else had heard her, but there was no one else in the aisle. And then, as I stepped out from behind a pillar, I saw her. Lisa was standing by the back of the church, her back to me, her face twisted in some sort of relief, triumph. She didn't know I was there, didn't know I had heard. Finally free. The words echoed in my mind, and suddenly everything clicked into place. She wasn't just mourning Jason, she was relieved. I didn't understand. Why would she say something like that, at a funeral, no less? Had she hated him? Had their marriage been as broken as I feared? I wasn't sure what to do. I wanted to confront her, to ask her right there and then what she meant, but my feet felt like they were glued to the floor. I wanted to shout at her, to make her feel the weight of her words, but I didn't. I just stood there, watching. The room felt suddenly too small, suffocating in a way I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. Anger? Confusion? Hurt? All of them, I guess. But one thing was clear. I couldn't let this go. Not now, not ever. I had spent years biting my tongue, hiding my feelings because I didn't want to cause a scene. But I'd had enough. This wasn't just about Jason anymore. It was about something else. I stepped back as quietly as I could and made my way toward the exit. The cool air outside the church hit me like a slap in the face. I breathed in deeply, trying to clear the fog in my head. My legs felt weak beneath me, but I forced myself to take a few steps away from the building, away from the crowd, away from everything. It was like I had stepped into another world. Out here, away from all the people dressed in black, everything seemed so normal, so untouched. The sun shone down through the trees, casting long shadows across the gravel parking lot. But nothing felt normal, not today, not after what I had heard. I knew I should go back inside. I should be there, with my family, honoring Jason. But there was something about Lisa's words, the way they had sliced through me, that made it impossible to just go back to the way things were. I repeated the words under my breath as I walked aimlessly along the edge of the lot. I couldn't get the sound of her voice out of my head. That was no grieving widow. That was a woman who had just been released from some kind of prison. And it wasn't just Jason she was glad to be rid of. It was me. I could feel it in my gut. She had never liked me. Not from the moment she walked into our lives. She had always been polite, always smiling, always acting like the perfect wife and mother. But behind those smiles, there was a coldness I had sensed, a coldness that only grew colder with time. When Jason had married her, I had hoped for the best. I really did. But as time went on, I saw the way she manipulated him, the way she made him choose her over me. There were moments, so many moments, when I had wanted to scream at him, to tell him that something wasn't right, that he didn't deserve to be treated like that. But I kept quiet. I respected his choices, even when I disagreed with them. But hearing Lisa's voice just now, hearing her so relieved, it felt like a betrayal, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I could keep quiet anymore. I pulled my phone from my bag and stared at it for a moment, my fingers hovering over the screen. I had no idea what I was about to do, but something told me I wasn't going to just walk away from this. I had been silenced for far too long. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb pausing over Jason's number. I could almost hear his voice in my ear, reminding me that everything would be okay, that no matter what happened, we'd get through it together. But he wasn't here anymore. I couldn't hear him, and I wasn't sure I could even feel him beside me. I tapped the screen and pulled up Lisa's number. My heart was beating fast, but I didn't stop to think. Barbara? Her voice came through the phone, sharp and surprised. She had probably expected someone else. I didn't give her a chance to say anything more. It's me, Barbara. I could hear her pause, the way she stiffened on the other end. I didn't care. I had to do this. What was that about? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. You know, earlier, at the church, you said something I don't think you meant for anyone to hear. Lisa's silence stretched on for a moment before she finally spoke. Barbara, I don't know what you think you heard, but No, I cut her off, my voice louder now, more sure. Don't lie to me, Lisa. You said, finally free. And I want to know what the hell that means. You don't get to talk about my son like that, not while I'm still standing here. There was a long, uncomfortable pause, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But she didn't. I didn't mean it the way you think I did, she said, her voice tight, defensive. Then what did you mean? I demanded. You sound like you're celebrating something. I don't know if it's your freedom or something else, but don't play me for a fool. I'm not stupid, Lisa. I know you never really liked me, and I'm done pretending I don't see it. She didn't respond for a long time, and I could feel her stalling. I wasn't giving her the chance. You've been pushing me away for years, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Every time I tried to spend time with my grandkids, you had an excuse. Every time I called Jason, you'd make sure he was busy. That was your way of keeping him from me. I saw it. I saw what you did to him, Lisa, and I just let you do it because he loved you. But now I see the truth, and I'm not backing down. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, and then, finally, she spoke. Do you really think you know everything? Her voice was low, dangerous now. You think it was me pushing Jason away? You have no idea, Barbara. You don't know what he was like when we got married. He changed, and not for the better. But you don't want to hear that, do you? You just want to blame me for everything that went wrong. I felt a rush of anger flood through me, but I bit it back. Don't do this, Lisa. Don't make me out to be the villain. I don't need to hear your excuses. What I heard today, what you said, that's what I need to hear. Not your lies. I didn't mean to say it like that, she whispered after a long pause. But I'm not sorry for what happened. You don't know everything that went on between us, Barbara, and you never will. Her words hung in the air, sharp and cold, but they also didn't feel like an apology, and in that moment, I realized something. She was still lying, and I couldn't let her get away with it. I took a deep breath. You don't get to act like you've won, Lisa. I'm not backing down. The line went dead. The phone call ended with the kind of silence that made my ears ring. I stood there for a few moments, staring at the screen, half expecting Lisa to call back and apologize, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. The damage was done, and I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this go. The truth was, I hadn't been blind to what was going on between Lisa and Jason. I just hadn't wanted to see it. I had allowed myself to believe the best, even when my gut told me otherwise. But today, after hearing her words, it was clear that I had been fooling myself for far too long. Lisa wasn't the victim. She was playing a game, and I had been the one who had fallen for it. The more I thought about the things she had said about Jason changing after they got married, the more I realized there had been something broken in their marriage long before his death. Jason had always been a bit distant in the past few years, but I had chalked it up to life, to work, to the usual stuff. But maybe there was more to it than that. Maybe I had been so caught up in my own life that I hadn't seen what was happening in his. I needed answers, and the only way to get them was to go straight to the source. I drove home from the church with my mind racing. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Too quiet. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the hallway as I dropped my purse on the kitchen table. I should have gone to the wake, stayed with my family, but I felt restless, angry. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was normal. I pulled out my phone again, but this time it wasn't Lisa's number I was staring at. I scrolled through the contacts and found the one name that still made my stomach twist. It was Jason's brother, Tom. He and Jason hadn't been close in the last few years, but I knew he still cared. Maybe he knew something. Maybe he had seen the cracks in Jason and Lisa's marriage before anyone else. I hit the call button before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. Hello? Tom's voice was rough, like he had been crying. Tom, it's Barbara, I said, my voice tight. I need to talk to you. There was a pause, then a sigh. Barbara, I don't know what to say. It's been a rough couple of days. I know, I said, my chest tight with emotion. But this is important. It's about Jason, about him and Lisa. He sighed again. What about them? I overheard something today at the funeral. Lisa said, finally free. I could hear him pause on the other end of the line. The silence was thick, like he was processing what I had just said. Finally free? He repeated, his voice cautious. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I said, I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. I heard her, and it's like she was relieved, like Jason's death was some kind of release for her. Tom was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in his mind. I don't know what to say, Barbara, he finally said, his voice low. I've never liked her, you know that. But Jason, he was in a bad place. We all knew it. but none of us wanted to admit it. "What do you mean by a bad place?" I asked, my heart pounding. What was going on between them? What was he like? Tom hesitated, like he wasn't sure how much to tell me. Jason, he wasn't happy, Barbara. Not for a while. It's hard to explain, but he had changed. He wasn't the same person he was when he married her. He became distant. And Lisa? Well, she wasn't exactly the picture of a loving wife. She had her own issues. They both did. My breath caught in my throat. What kind of issues? I'm not sure you want to know, honestly, he said, his voice sounding strained. But Jason, he had been seeing someone else. I don't know who exactly, but he told me a few months ago that he felt trapped, that he couldn't get out of his marriage. He didn't know what to do. I leaned back against the counter, the weight of his words hitting me like a punch to the stomach. Jason had been seeing someone else, and he hadn't told me? That's why he seemed so distant, Tom continued. But it wasn't just Lisa. There was a lot of emotional stuff going on. Jason didn't know how to deal with it. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't anyone say anything? Because Jason asked me not to, Tom replied, his voice tight. He didn't want anyone to know. He didn't want to hurt you, Barbara. He knew how much you loved him. He didn't want you to think less of him. The tears started to burn in my eyes, and I wiped them away angrily. I would have understood, Tom. I always would have understood. I know, Barbara, he said quietly. But he didn't think you would. And honestly, neither did I. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. My son had been suffering in silence, and I hadn't known. I hadn't been there for him the way I should have been. And now he was gone. And I was left with nothing but the wreckage of a marriage I didn't understand, and a daughter-in-law who had made it clear she was relieved to be rid of him. I need to know more, I said, my voice hardening. I need to know everything, about Jason, about Lisa, about what happened in that marriage. I'm not going to let her get away with this. Tom was quiet for a long time, but when he spoke again, I could hear the resolve in his voice. I'll tell you what I know, Barbara, but you need to be ready for it. This isn't going to be easy. I'm ready, I said, my voice cold and firm. I need to know the truth, Tom. I deserve that much. I'll call you later, he said. But don't do anything rash, okay? Just let me help you. I hung up without saying goodbye, feeling the weight of his words settle over me like a heavy blanket. There was a storm coming. I could feel it in my bones, and I wasn't going to wait around for it to hit. I was going to make sure Lisa faced the consequences of her actions. No more lies, no more secrets. I was done being silent. The next few days dragged by like a blur of empty hours, each one feeling like it stretched into infinity. I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest, the gnawing hunger for answers that wouldn't stop clawing at me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lisa's face. Every time I heard a car door slam or someone laugh in the distance, my heart would skip a beat. And I'd remember that cold, cruel sneer she'd thrown over her shoulder when she thought no one was watching. Finally free. Those words haunted me. They didn't just sting because of what they implied about her. No, they gnawed at something deeper. I'd spent years trying to make excuses for the cracks I saw in her, in their marriage, but those words told me everything I needed to know. She had never loved Jason the way he deserved, and for that, she would answer. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about setting the record straight. My son, Jason, was gone, and he deserved better than to be the punchline of someone else's twisted relief. I spent the next few days digging. I went through old family photos, emails, even messages that had been saved on our family computer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe some shred of proof that I could confront Lisa with. Something that would back up the sinking feeling in my gut. Maybe something that would show me how I missed the signs. I didn't care if it made me look obsessive. I had to know. I had to know what had really happened. Late one night, while going through some old pictures, I came across a folder labeled Jason and Lisa. I had never seen it before, and at first I thought maybe it was just a collection of vacation photos or memories from their time together. But when I opened it, I froze. There were pictures in there I didn't expect. Pictures of Lisa and Jason that I had never seen. but it wasn't the kind of photos I thought they would be. There was one of Jason standing in a park, looking distant. Lisa wasn't with him, but there was another woman beside him. My stomach lurched as I recognized her from a few family gatherings. A woman I had never paid much attention to before, but I had seen her at parties and holiday dinners. She was younger than Lisa, her features soft, her eyes bright. There was something in her smile, though, something that didn't belong with Jason's guarded expression. I clicked on another picture, then another. They were taken in various places: restaurants, a hotel lobby, even what looked like a beach. Each one was more intimate than the last. In one, they were holding hands. In another, Jason was leaning in close, whispering something to her. I felt sick to my stomach. I clicked the folder shut, my hands trembling. It was all starting to come together in a way I hadn't imagined. Lisa had known. She had to have known. And Jason, he had been suffocating under the weight of a life he didn't want. He hadn't been free. He had been trapped. But the worst part, I hadn't been there for him. I had been so blinded by my own role as a mother, by my own grief, that I had missed the most important part of Jason's life. And now I couldn't undo that. But I could stop Lisa from making this about her. I pulled up Tom's number again, my fingers shaking as I dialed. "Barbara?" His voice was thick with sleep, but it sounded like he was already awake. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's about Jason. I found something." There was a pause, a long one, before he spoke again. "What did you find?" I told him everything, about the pictures, about the other woman, about how Jason had been living a life of lies. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. "You know I've never liked Lisa," Tom said, his voice measured. "But I never knew it had gone that far. Jason, he never told me anything like that." "I know," I replied, the bitterness starting to seep into my voice. "None of us knew, but now we do, Tom. And I'm not going to let her act like she was the innocent one." "I understand," he said quietly. "But you need to be careful, Barbara. Lisa's dangerous. You know that. You've seen it. She'll twist everything around, make you look like the villain. She's good at that. And if you push her, she won't stop until she's destroyed everything you've worked for." "I don't care anymore," I said, my voice sharp. "What's she going to do? Keep lying? Keep pretending she wasn't the one who broke him? I'm done with her games." Tom sighed. "I'll help you. I know you want to get the truth out there. I'll be with you every step of the way. But be smart about this. Don't let her take you down with her." I paused. "I won't." The line went dead after a few more words, and I was left alone with my thoughts again. The next step was clear. I had to confront Lisa, and I had to do it in a way that would leave no room for her to deny anything. I was going to expose her, and this time there was no going back. The following morning, I made the decision. It wasn't just about Jason anymore. It wasn't about the years of silence and resentment I had kept buried. It wasn't even about revenge, though that was a part of it. It was about closure, about making sure that no one else in the family, no one else who knew Jason, would walk away thinking Lisa was the innocent widow who had been left with nothing but grief. I wasn't going to let her write the story anymore. I was going to take control. The confrontation was coming, and I would make sure it was done right. No more lies, no more games. This time, Lisa was going to face the consequences. I didn't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was when I hung up the phone with Tom, or maybe it was the moment I had found those pictures, but something inside me had snapped. My sense of control, the calm composure I had held for so long, had unraveled. I was no longer just Barbara, the grieving mother. I was a woman who had been wronged, who had been played for a fool for far too long, and I was done. Lisa was going to face the truth, whether she liked it or not. I spent that afternoon gathering my thoughts, writing down everything I wanted to say, every fact, every emotion I wanted to convey. This wasn't just about confronting her for the sake of feeling good. This was about ending the lie. I was going to make sure Lisa understood the depth of her betrayal, and I was going to do it on my terms. When I finally dialed Lisa's number, I was shaking. Not from fear, but from the sheer force of what I was about to do. This wasn't some petty argument. It was a reckoning. She had to understand that her actions had consequences, that there was a price to pay for treating Jason like he was disposable. She picked up on the second ring, her voice fake sweet as always. "Barbara, darling, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. How are you holding up?" I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Cut the crap, Lisa. We need to talk." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear her scrambling for the right words. "What's going on, Barbara?" "You know exactly what's going on," I said, my voice cold as ice. "You think you're so clever, don't you? Sneering at my son's funeral, acting like you're the one who's been wronged. Finally free, you said. I heard you." There was a sharp intake of breath, but she didn't respond right away. I didn't give her the chance to smooth things over. "You think you're free now that Jason's gone? But you and I both know you were never free, Lisa. Not until he was dead. You've been playing a game, haven't you? Pretending to be the perfect wife while secretly… doing what?" The line went dead silent, so quiet I thought for a second that she'd hung up. But then her voice came, small and trembling, with an edge I had never heard before. "What do you want from me, Barbara?" I leaned in, every word I spoke full of weight. "I want you to admit it. I want you to admit what you did to him, to Jason, how you treated him, how you humiliated him, how you drove him to the edge." I didn't, she stammered, but I cut her off. "You think I didn't see it? You think I didn't notice the way you treated him? The way you treated me? The way you took everything he had and left him with nothing?" I could feel my voice getting louder, the hurt and anger I had been bottling up for so long spilling over. "He wasn't happy, Lisa. You weren't enough for him. You never were. And now you want to act like you're the innocent widow? You've got the nerve to show up at his funeral and say you're finally free? What about Jason's freedom? You took that from him." There was a long, tense silence. I could hear her breathing heavily, trying to gather herself. When she spoke again, her tone was different. It wasn't defensive anymore. It was something darker. "You think you know what happened between Jason and me?" Lisa's voice was low, almost mocking. "You think you know the truth? You have no idea. He was never the man you thought he was. He was weak, Barbara. He always was. And I got tired of holding him up, of trying to fix him. I didn't make him miserable. He made himself miserable. I was just trying to survive." I gritted my teeth. "Don't you dare try to twist this on him. Don't you dare blame him for everything. You're the one who played him. You're the one who was too busy with your own selfish games to notice the man you married was falling apart." "I didn't play him," Lisa snapped, her voice rising. "I did the best I could. You have no idea what it was like to be married to him. The lies, the distance, the constant… everything. He was always so broken, Barbara. So distant, so miserable. I tried, I really did, but he didn't want me anymore." Her voice faltered for a second, and I could hear the emotion crack through. She wasn't entirely cold. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I didn't know how to fix him," she whispered, barely audible now. "But I stayed. I stayed when everyone else walked away. And now that he's gone, I'm finally free." I clenched my fists. Her words were a slap in the face, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. "You think you're the only one who suffered? You think Jason was the only one hurting?" Her silence on the other end was the answer. She didn't care. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I've had enough of your lies, Lisa. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to pretend you were the victim. Jason deserves the truth, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." "Barbara, wait," she started, but I wasn't listening anymore. "You've already said enough," I replied, my voice hard. "You're not going to get away with this. The truth is coming out, Lisa. It's coming for you." I ended the call before she could say another word, the weight of what I'd just done sinking in. It wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a declaration. I had made my choice. There was no going back. Now the real work began. The next few days were a blur. The tension between me and Lisa escalated quickly. Word of the confrontation had already spread through the family, and I could tell Lisa was starting to panic. She didn't know how to handle me now, didn't know what to do with the truth I was pushing into the light. I wasn't going to stop until she faced the consequences. The days after that call with Lisa felt like I was living in a pressure cooker. Every word, every movement felt charged with tension. It was like a storm waiting to burst, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to be caught in the downpour or if I would be the one to strike the first blow. I kept thinking about Jason, how he'd lived in the shadows of this relationship for so long, carrying the weight of a love that had soured, drowning under the expectations and manipulation. And all the while, I had been too blind to see it, too caught up in the small dramas of our family, too wrapped up in my own grief to notice the bigger picture. But now I saw everything so clearly, and I couldn't let Lisa off the hook. Not now, not ever. I spent the next few days meticulously planning my next move. I knew I needed to get the truth out there, and I needed to do it in a way that would leave Lisa with nowhere to hide. If I wanted to destroy her carefully crafted narrative, I had to be strategic. The first step was talking to Tom again. I needed his help, but more than that, I needed his understanding. He was one of the few people who had ever truly known Jason, his best friend. He understood the quiet struggles, the things that went unsaid. I needed him to be on my side completely if I was going to face Lisa and her web of lies. I called him late one afternoon. "Barbara, what's going on?" His voice was tired, but there was a note of concern beneath it. "I need your help with something," I said, not bothering with small talk. "I'm going to expose Lisa. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what she did to Jason." Tom was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear him shifting in his chair. I could tell he was weighing his words carefully. "You're serious about this, huh?" he said finally. "I'm not backing down," I replied, my tone sharp. "I can't let her get away with this, not after everything she's done. I need someone who can back up what I'm saying, someone who can show people who Jason really was before Lisa turned him into whatever she wanted him to be." Tom sighed. "I'll do what I can. But you know how Lisa operates. She's always been good at turning people against each other. You're going to have to be careful, Barbara." "I'm not scared of her anymore, Tom," I said, a fire sparking in my chest. "I'm not going to let her get away with it." "I know," he said softly. "But don't forget, you're not just going up against her. You're going up against everyone who's been blinded by her lies for all these years. You need to be prepared for that." "I am," I said, my voice steady now. "I've never been more ready." That night, I spent hours putting everything together. Emails, text messages, photos, even phone records. Anything that could show how far Lisa had gone. She'd made sure Jason's life had been difficult, even miserable at times, and she had taken everything he had until there was nothing left for him to give. And now, it was time to make the world see it. The next day, I made my move. I reached out to a few close family members, the ones I knew would listen. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to get them curious, enough to make them question Lisa's version of events. I wanted them to see the cracks in her story, to realize that she was far from the innocent widow she had painted herself to be. The reactions were mixed. Some of them were skeptical, unsure of what to believe. Others were outright angry at the thought of Lisa lying. But one thing became clear. The seed of doubt had been planted. By the time I was ready to confront Lisa again, the family was already divided. And that, I realized, was the beginning of her downfall. I didn't waste any time. I knew Lisa would be expecting some sort of confrontation, but I also knew she wouldn't be prepared for what I was about to do. That evening I called her, again. This time there was no sweet talk, no pretending. I was done with the niceties. "I know what you've been doing, Lisa," I said coldly, my voice cutting through the line like a knife. "You've lied to everyone, and you've been using Jason for your own benefit. It's over." There was a long, pregnant pause on the other end. I could almost hear her trying to collect herself, trying to spin her web of lies into something that would make her look like the victim again. But I wasn't going to let her. "Barbara," she said, her voice high-pitched, "you don't know what you're talking about. I loved Jason. I did everything for him. You don't understand." "Oh, I understand just fine," I replied. "I understand that you used him, that you manipulated him into thinking he was worthless, and that you destroyed him piece by piece. You used him to build your perfect life, And now you want to play the grieving widow? I could hear her breathing heavily, her anger rising. You're wrong. You don't know anything about what happened between us. You've never understood. No, I said sharply. I understand more than you think, and now I'm going to make sure everyone else understands too. I hung up before she could say another word, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't over, not yet, but the battle was starting to shift in my favor. I wasn't going to stop until Lisa had no choice but to face the truth. I hadn't fully realized the weight of my own actions until the next morning. The phone calls, the whispered conversations, the questioning glances from family members, it all hit me at once. I wasn't just confronting Lisa anymore. I was starting a full-scale war, and once you ignite a fire like this, there's no controlling where it spreads. I woke up early, my mind buzzing with 1,000 thoughts. I hadn't expected everything to escalate so quickly, but then again, I should have known better. Once you pull back the curtain on someone's lies, there's no putting it back. I dressed in a rush, my hands shaking as I buttoned my blouse. I didn't have time to dwell on the guilt or second-guess my decision. I had a plan to follow through on. The only thing that mattered now was making sure Lisa couldn't wriggle her way out of this, no matter how hard she tried. The first person I needed to talk to was my sister, Karen. We weren't close, not really, but I knew she had a soft spot for me, and she respected me more than she respected Lisa. I had to make her see that Lisa wasn't the innocent woman she pretended to be. I dialed Karen's number, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Barb, what's up?" Her voice was cheerful, but I could tell she was a little surprised to hear from me so early. "Karen," I said, my tone serious, "I need you to listen to me, and I need you to listen closely. It's about Lisa." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What about Lisa? Has something happened?" "More like something's been happening for a long time, and I've just found out the truth." I took a deep breath. Lisa has been lying to everyone. She's been using Jason, and I have proof. There was silence for a moment, and I could almost hear Karen's mind racing as she processed the words. "What are you talking about, Barb? You know I love you, but—" "Listen," I cut her off, my voice firm. "I'm not going to explain all the details right now, but I've got evidence. Text messages, emails, stuff that shows what Lisa really did to Jason. She made his life miserable, and now she's pretending to be the grieving widow, when all along she's been playing everyone, including you." Karen let out a sigh, the tension in her voice palpable. "I don't know, Barb. I mean, I never liked how she treated Jason, but then why didn't you ever say anything?" I shot back, frustration creeping into my voice. Why didn't anyone ever question her? She wasn't just cold, she was cruel, and she used Jason until he had nothing left. "I didn't know," Karen said, her voice softer now. "I didn't see it, but now that you're saying all this, it's making sense." "I need you to trust me, Karen," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not doing this to hurt anyone. I'm doing this because Jason deserves the truth to come out. I'm going to make sure everyone knows who Lisa really is." There was a long pause before Karen spoke again. "I'll help. I'll do whatever I can." "Thank you," I said, relief flooding through me. "Just be ready. This isn't going to be easy, but it's the right thing to do." We hung up, and I felt a strange sense of purpose settle over me. I had Karen in my corner now, and that made a world of difference. But I wasn't done yet. Next, I called a few of Jason's old friends. Tom had already agreed to help, but I needed a few more people who had seen what Lisa had done, people who could corroborate the story and show that it wasn't just my word against hers. It was time for the truth to spill out, and once it did, Lisa wouldn't be able to hide anymore. The phone calls were draining, but each one brought me closer to my goal. Slowly, the walls that Lisa had built around herself started to crack. More and more people started to come forward, sharing their own experiences, their own observations. Some were hesitant, but most were angry, disgusted by how Lisa had treated Jason. They were all willing to speak up. But the real turning point came when I got a call from Jason's old therapist, Dr. Spencer. "Barbara," he said, his voice calm and professional, "I received your message. I'm happy to help, but I need to be very clear with you. Anything I say could be taken as confidential. I can't give you any details about your son's therapy, but I can confirm one thing. Jason was struggling, and it wasn't just with the grief of his father's passing. I swallowed hard. You know it was Lisa, don't you? You know she was part of the reason he was falling apart. I can't confirm anything about the relationship between Jason and his wife, Dr. Spencer continued, but I can tell you this. Jason came to me several times expressing how isolated and unsupported he felt in his marriage. He didn't have a single person in his life who understood him. That was all I needed to hear. I knew it, I muttered under my breath. I knew it wasn't just Jason. Dr. Spencer's voice softened. I'm sorry for your loss, Barbara, and I'm sorry Jason had to endure so much. I'll do what I can to help you. Thank you, I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. You don't know how much this means. With Dr. Spencer's confirmation, I felt like I had everything I needed. Lisa couldn't deny what I now had at my disposal. The pieces of the puzzle were all coming together. Every conversation, every piece of evidence, every witness, it all led to one undeniable truth. Lisa was the one who had broken Jason, not the other way around. But I knew the hardest part was yet to come. The public confrontation. I wasn't just going to tell people the truth. I was going to make sure Lisa couldn't ignore it. I was going to make her face it head on. And once I did, there would be no going back. The air felt thick with anticipation. I had been preparing for this moment for days, and now it was finally here. The plan was in motion. The family was gathering for the memorial. Nothing extravagant, just a small affair at the house, but a gathering that would be the perfect stage for everything I'd been working toward. The truth was going to be exposed, and Lisa had no idea what was about to hit her. I stood in front of the mirror, trying to steady my nerves. My reflection stared back at me, a woman who had lost so much, but who had also found her strength. The anger that had been a constant companion in my life since Jason's death was now a fire that fueled me, propelling me forward. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I wasn't going to let Lisa continue to lie about what she had done. Not now, not ever. I put on my best outfit, a black dress that was understated but sharp. No need for excess. This wasn't about appearances, it was about the truth. As I adjusted my hair and made sure everything was in place, I heard the doorbell ring. It was Tom. I opened the door and he stood there, his face solemn but supportive. He looked me over quickly, then nodded. "Ready?" he asked, his voice calm, but I could hear the underlying tension in his words. He knew what was coming, and he knew it wasn't going to be easy. "I am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But deep down, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I really ready? Could I go through with it? Tom placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone. We're all behind you, every step of the way." "Thanks," I whispered. "I couldn't do this without you." We both walked into the living room where the others were already gathering. Family members, friends, acquaintances, all of them had come to pay their respects. But what they didn't know was that today was going to be about far more than just remembering Jason. It was going to be about truth, about justice. Lisa was already there, of course, standing by the window, her hands clasped together in that fake, grieving way she'd perfected. She turned when she heard us enter, her eyes narrowing slightly. The slightest flicker of something crossed her face. Suspicion, maybe? I didn't care. The moment I'd been waiting for was upon me, and there was no turning back. I walked straight toward her, every step purposeful, every breath calculated. I could feel Tom's presence behind me, a silent support that grounded me. "Barbara," Lisa said, her voice laced with that same syrupy sweetness she always used when she was trying to manipulate someone. "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you might be avoiding all of this." I stared at her, not bothering with pleasantries. "You've been avoiding the truth for years, Lisa, but today that's about to change." Her smile faltered for a moment, just the slightest shift in her mask. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, my voice low but sharp. I took a step closer, watching her closely. "You've lied to everyone, about Jason, about me, about all of it, and I'm not going to let you keep pretending anymore." Lisa's eyes flicked toward the others in the room. She didn't expect this confrontation, not like this, and I could see her scrambling to regain control. But there was no escaping it now. She was trapped. "You're crazy," she sneered, her voice laced with venom. "You're just bitter because Jason left you behind. He didn't love you like he loved me. I was the one who was there for him when he needed someone. You were too busy wallowing in your grief to even notice him." I felt a surge of fury rising within me, but I kept my voice steady. "That's the lie you've been telling, isn't it? You've painted yourself as the victim when all along you've been destroying him. I have proof, Lisa. I have everything. Text messages, emails, witness statements, everything that shows what you did to him." Lisa's face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might break. But she quickly recovered, her eyes flashing with anger. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just an angry, grieving mother who's upset because she didn't get her way. You're pathetic." I didn't flinch. "You've been playing that game for too long. You think people don't see through you? That's where you're wrong. I've been talking to Jason's friends. I've been talking to people who saw what you did to him. They know the truth, Lisa." The room had gone silent. The other people in the house were listening now, and I could see the looks of confusion and disbelief crossing their faces. This wasn't just an argument. It was the moment that would change everything. Lisa's mask finally slipped. She looked around at the gathered guests, her lips trembling with fury. "You don't know what you're talking about. You have no idea what I went through. What we went through." "You think I don't know?" I said, my voice rising now. "You think I don't know what it's like to love someone who's broken, to watch them fall apart? You did that to him, Lisa. You took everything from him, and now you're trying to play the martyr. But not anymore. I'm done letting you get away with it." Lisa was seething, but she was running out of steam. Her carefully crafted facade was crumbling piece by piece. "Don't you dare accuse me of anything," she hissed. "I loved Jason. He was my husband. I know exactly what you did to him, and I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too," I said, my voice unwavering. "This ends today. You don't get to control the narrative anymore." With those words, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lisa behind, her face twisted with rage. The others followed me, eyes wide with shock, and I could feel the shift in the air. The truth was no longer something Lisa could hide from. It was out, and there was no going back. It was like everything shifted in an instant. The room, still thick with tension, seemed to hold its breath as the weight of my words hung in the air. I could feel eyes on me, some in disbelief, some in quiet support. But none of them were looking at Lisa anymore, not the way they used to. That mask of hers had shattered, and with it, her hold on the narrative she'd worked so hard to create. I could still hear her in the other room, her voice rising in an almost frantic pitch, trying to regain control, trying to convince everyone she was the victim. But I didn't care anymore. I knew the truth, and now everyone else would too. I moved through the house like I was in a daze, my thoughts racing faster than I could keep up. How had it come to this? How had I let my son's death be turned into something so ugly? Lisa had twisted everything, and I had let her. But not anymore. Today, I was taking back control. I was going to expose the woman who had manipulated everyone, including me. I had the evidence, I had the witnesses, and now it was time to make sure everyone knew who Lisa really was. I found Karen in the kitchen, talking quietly with Tom. They both looked up when I walked in, and Karen gave me a soft, supportive smile. But it was Tom who spoke first. "You did the right thing, Barb," he said quietly. She needed to hear it. They all did. I nodded, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. I had to, for Jason. He deserves the truth. Karen reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this. We've got your back. You've been through so much, and now it's time for Lisa to face the consequences." I swallowed hard, nodding again. The anger I felt toward Lisa still simmered under the surface. But it wasn't just anger anymore. It was a strange mixture of relief and satisfaction. I had done what needed to be done. But there was still one more thing I had to do. I turned to Tom. "Can you get the others? I need them all to hear it. I need everyone to know what Lisa did to Jason." Tom didn't hesitate. "On it, I'll round them up." I watched him leave the kitchen, and then I turned to Karen. I don't know if I'm ready for everything to come out like this. I mean, what if... Barb, she interrupted gently, you don't have to be ready. You just have to do what's right. And you're doing it. Don't second-guess yourself now. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words sink in. She was right. There was no turning back, no reason to hesitate now. I had to see this through to the end. The rest of the family trickled into the living room, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and caution. They had all heard the shouting, but they hadn't yet processed the truth of what had just unfolded. Now they would. Tom stood at the door, holding it open for the last few stragglers to come in, and then he closed it behind him with a soft click. The room was packed now. Everyone who had been close to Jason, everyone who had cared about him in one way or another, all waiting in the silence that had descended after my confrontation with Lisa. I stood at the front of the room, the eyes of a dozen people trained on me. I felt the weight of their gazes, but this time, it didn't make me nervous. It didn't make me shrink back. I was done with hiding, done with pretending. This was my moment. I'm not going to keep you all in suspense, I said, my voice clear and firm. You've all heard the screaming in the other room. You've all heard Lisa's excuses. But what you don't know is that the woman who's been standing here, pretending to be the grieving widow, is the same woman who drove my son to his grave. Gasps filled the room. Lisa's face twisted with outrage, her eyes flashing with panic. But I wasn't going to stop now. I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let her twist it any longer. I know it's hard to believe, I continued, locking eyes with each person in the room. But I've been through Jason's things. I've read his journals. I've spoken to his friends, and I've seen the texts, the emails, the conversations that Lisa tried to hide. She was the one who made his life hell. She tore him apart piece by piece. And now she wants to stand here, pretending she's the innocent one? Lisa took a step toward me, her voice shaking with fury. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just bitter. You're just angry because I was the one who actually cared for him. I was the one who— No, I cut her off sharply. You didn't care for him. You used him. You manipulated him, and when he couldn't give you what you wanted anymore, you tossed him aside like garbage. That's who you are. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows. I turned to the others in the room, my voice rising in strength. This isn't just about me and Lisa. This is about Jason. He was my son, and he deserves more than to be remembered as a man who was broken by his own wife. He deserves to be remembered for who he truly was. Someone who loved deeply, who cared for others, who was trying to find peace. And that's what I'm going to make sure happens. The room was silent now. No one spoke, no one moved. But the shift in the atmosphere was undeniable. I could feel it, the realization that the truth was finally out, and nothing would be the same after today. Lisa's face had gone pale, and I saw the panic in her eyes. She was no longer the confident, calculating woman who had controlled every situation for so long. She was the one on the defensive now, and there was nothing she could do to fix it. I'm done with this, I said, my voice firm. I'm done with pretending, done with letting her manipulate all of us. This is the truth, and from here on out, we're all going to live in it. The room was so still, you could hear a pin drop. Every person stood there, frozen in place, processing what had just been revealed. It was as if time itself had come to a halt, suspended between the past lies and the undeniable truth that had just shattered everything. Lisa's face was drained of color, and she was trembling, though she tried to mask it with a forced smile. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for some ally, some hand to reach out to, but no one moved. No one came to her defense. She stammered, trying to compose herself, but the words caught in her throat. You can't. This isn't right, Barbara. This isn't the way to— You think I care about what's right for you? I shot back, stepping forward. You've spent years ruining people's lives, pretending to be the victim. You think I'm going to let you keep spinning your lies? Not anymore. Her shoulders hunched, and for the first time, I saw something resembling fear in her eyes. She had been so sure, so confident that she could control everything, even Jason's memory, but now it was slipping away from her like sand through her fingers. I didn't want this, Lisa said weakly, her voice cracking. I didn't want any of this. It was always... He didn't... She faltered again, unable to keep the story straight. The cracks were widening, and she could feel herself losing her grip. I took a deep breath, allowing the weight of the moment to settle in my chest. For years, I had carried the burden of Jason's death and the guilt that came with it, not knowing the full extent of what he had endured at Lisa's hands. I had been blind, too consumed by my own grief to see the signs, but now the pieces were falling into place. And this moment, right now, was the culmination of everything. "This isn't about you anymore, Lisa," I said, my voice quieter but just as firm. "This is about Jason. The truth is finally coming to light, and no matter how much you try to twist it, people are starting to see who you really are." A tear slipped down her cheek, but I didn't feel any sympathy, not anymore. I wasn't going to let her turn this moment into something she could control. I was done with playing the victim, done with letting her manipulate me and everyone else around her. I turned to the others in the room, my gaze sweeping over their faces. Some looked shocked, others unsure, but they were all watching intently, waiting for what would happen next. "Everyone here has their own version of the truth," I continued, addressing the room now. "But the truth that matters is Jason's. He suffered, and Lisa was the cause of that suffering. You all need to know that. You need to know what kind of person she really is." There was a long silence. No one spoke. But then Tom stepped forward, his face hardening as he locked eyes with Lisa. "I think it's time to end this," he said, his voice cool but full of authority. "We all deserve to know what really happened, and it's clear now that we won't get it from you." Lisa's lip trembled as she tried to speak, but no words came out. It was over. The final illusion was shattered, and the truth could no longer be hidden. "I know you think you've gotten away with everything," I said, my voice gaining strength. "But you haven't. Not anymore. This is where it ends." The others in the room stood quietly, letting the weight of my words settle in. For the first time, I saw a shift in their faces. Recognition, understanding, and something more. The realization that Lisa's grip on their lives was finally loosening. And then, just as I thought it was over, Lisa spoke, her voice low and defeated. "Please, don't do this," she whispered. I loved him, Barbara. I really did. He was everything to me." I stared at her, my heart cold. "No, Lisa, you loved what you could control. You loved the power you had over him, but you never truly loved him, not like I did." Her shoulders sagged, and she finally broke down, her body racked with sobs. But I didn't feel the desire to comfort her. I didn't feel any sympathy, not anymore. She had used my son, twisted his life, and now she was paying the price for it. "I know you're sorry, Lisa," I said, my voice steady now. "But sorry isn't enough, not after what you've done." There was a finality in my voice that made everyone in the room fall silent again. The truth had been spoken, and there was no taking it back. The past could never be erased, no matter how much Lisa tried to rewrite it. It was over. Lisa's sobs slowly quieted as she realized that there was no more room for her to hide. The lies were exposed, the truth had been laid bare, and there was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart heavy, but also lighter than it had been in years. The weight of the past had finally been lifted, and with it, the chains that had held me down. Jason's memory was now safe from the distortions that Lisa had tried to impose on it. As I stepped outside, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool evening air fill my lungs. It wasn't over, there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. I looked up at the sky, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not a fake smile, not a mask, but a real one. I had faced my past, confronted the lies, and now it was time to heal. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story.